The sky above the alien world was heavy with dark clouds. The air was sharp, carrying the taste of storms and the strange silence of an empty land. David walked slowly across the dusty plain, his boots pressing into soil that had not felt human footsteps before. He was an explorer, searching for ruins and stories of the past, but nothing had prepared him for what he was about to find. The village he had passed through only a few hours ago had warned him. The old people had shaken their heads, whispering about curses and dangers. The younger ones had stared at him with wide eyes, almost begging him not to go. They spoke of a wall, older than memory, older than their history. They said no one should touch it, no one should even stand too close. But David was not the kind of man to turn back from mystery. He had crossed stars to reach this world, and fear was never enough to stop him. When he first saw the wall, he stopped breathing for a moment. It rose like a mountain of stone, stretching across the horizon as if it had no end. The surface was black and cold, covered with deep carvings and symbols that glowed faintly in the fading light. It was beautiful, but also terrifying. The silence around it was complete, as though even the wind was too afraid to touch this place. David placed his hand on the surface, and the stone felt alive. A shiver ran through him, but he did not pull away. Instead, he stepped back and studied the carvings. Some looked like stars, others like creatures he could not name. There was a rhythm in them, a hidden pattern, as if the wall was trying to speak, but in a language long forgotten. He set up his small camp near the wall, despite the warnings. The fire crackled softly, but it felt weak compared to the weight of the structure beside him. As night fell, the walls seemed to grow darker, swallowing even the firelight. David sat with his notebook, sketching the patterns he had seen. But every few minutes, he found himself staring back at the wall, as though it was staring at him too. The storm broke near midnight. Lightning tore across the sky, lighting the carvings for brief seconds. Thunder shook the ground, and David felt the earth tremble beneath him. It was then, when the world was full of chaos, that he heard it. A whisper, soft at first, then louder, like a voice coming from behind the stone. His heart pounded as he looked around. The camp was empty, no one else was near. Yet the voice came again, low and chilling, carried not by the air, but inside his own mind. "Strike the wall," it said. David froze, his breath caught in his throat. He told himself it was only the storm, only the sound of wind against stone. But deep inside, he knew the truth. The wall had spoken. Fear should have made him run, but curiosity was stronger. He picked up his tool, the metal heavy in his hands. The villagers had called him foolish, but now he felt something else, something greater pulling him forward. He stepped closer, the rain washing over his face, lightning flashing across the wall. He raised the tool and struck the stone. The sound rang out like a bell, shaking through the night. The carvings glowed brighter, lines of light racing through them like fire in veins. The ground shook harder, nearly throwing David to his knees. And then, through the roar of thunder, through the storm itself, came the voice again. This time it was clear, powerful, impossible to ignore. "You freed me," it whispered. David stumbled back, his chest rising and falling. The wall pulsed like a living heart, each beat echoing in his bones. The storm raged around him, but he could not look away. Something ancient was waking, and he was the one who had set it free. For a long moment he stood there, trembling. His mind screamed for him to run, to escape, to leave this cursed place. But another part of him, a deeper part, told him he had only begun a story much larger than himself. He did not know what he had freed or why it had waited for him. But he knew one thing. The world, his world, would never be the same again. The wall whispered once more, softer now, almost gentle. "Come closer," it said. And though fear filled every corner of his soul, David took a single step forward. The night was heavy, the storm was endless, but inside the wall, something ancient smiled, waiting. The storm continued through the night, but David no longer cared about the rain or the thunder. His heart was fixed on the wall, on the glowing lines that now pulsed with strange light. He had heard the words clearly, not with his ears, but inside his very mind. "You freed me," the voice had said, and the meaning of those words cut deeper than the storm itself. David stood close to the wall, the tool still heavy in his hand. The carvings shimmered like rivers of light, bending and twisting as though alive. Then the whisper returned, stronger now, steady like a calm voice breaking through chaos. "You hear me, human, you broke the first chain?" David's breath shook. He had no answer, yet the voice continued. "Do not fear. I am not your enemy. I have waited for centuries. I knew one day a human would come." The explorer's thoughts raced. Why would an ancient alien wall wait for him? A single man, far from home. He whispered aloud, though his voice was drowned by rain. "Who are you?" At once the wall seemed to vibrate, and the reply filled his head like thunder without sound. "I'm the prisoner of this stone. I was locked away when the stars were young. They feared my power, they feared my knowledge, so they built this wall as my cage." David staggered back, his boots slipping on the wet earth. The villagers had warned him, and now he understood why their eyes carried so much fear. But there was something in the voice, not wild, not monstrous, but heavy with sorrow. It did not sound like a beast, it sounded like a soldier, broken yet unyielding. The voice spoke again, low and steady. "They told you I am a curse, but I am a weapon against the true curse. They hid me here to erase the truth, to make me a shadow in forgotten history." David swallowed hard, lightning flashing across his face. "What truth?" he asked. The wall pulsed brighter. "The empire that once ruled these stars fell because of betrayal, not because of weakness. They've buried me here because I carried the secret of their lies. I was their greatest warrior, and they feared my return." David tried to calm himself, his mind pulling between doubt and belief. Every word could be a trick, a trap, a way to lure him into breaking more seals. It's something inside told him the voice was not lying. Its sorrow was too deep, its strength too real. The ground rumbled again, and the glowing cracks spread wider. The villagers far away must have seen it too, must have felt the shaking earth beneath their feet. Soon they would come with fire and weapons, screaming that he had awakened the curse. David had little time. The prisoner's voice turned urgent. "You must listen, human, others will come. Not your villagers, but enemies from the stars, the same who betrayed me. They are watching this place, waiting for the moment I awaken. They will strike at your people, they will burn your worlds." David froze, the weight of those words sinking like stones in water. If what the voice said was true, then humanity itself was in danger. "Why me?" he whispered, his voice breaking. The answer came swiftly. "Because only human hands could break the seal. It was written in their own fear. They knew your kind would one day rise. They prepared for you without knowing, and now you have come." The carvings glowed brighter than before, and the rain seemed to vanish against the heat of the wall. David shielded his face, but the voice pushed into his mind stronger than ever. "Strike again, break the second chain. Only then will I stand beside you. Only then can I fight for you." David gripped his tool tightly. The choice weighed heavy on him, heavier than any burden he had ever carried. If he struck again, he might unleash something the villagers feared for centuries. But if he walked away, if he left this being trapped, humanity might face enemies it was not ready to fight. His heart pounded, torn between fear and duty. Lightning split the sky, the walls glow burning against the storm. The prisoner's whisper softened, almost gentle now. "Trust me, human, the chains that hold me are the chains that weaken your future." David took one step forward, his shadow stretching long against the glowing wall. He raised his tool once more, his hand trembling not from the storm, but from the weight of his choice. He hesitated, his breath ragged. The voice waited, silent now, as if it knew the decision had to come from him alone. And in that silence, David realized something. He was no longer just an explorer. no longer just a man searching for ruins. He was part of a story written long before his birth, a story of chains, betrayal, and freedom. The storm raged, the wall pulsed, and David's grip tightened. Whatever choice he made now would echo across worlds. The night after the whisper felt longer than time itself. David did not sleep, his eyes fixed on the glowing cracks spreading across the ancient wall. The storm had begun to fade, but the ground still shook every few moments, as if the world itself was breathing. He felt as though he was standing at the edge of something far greater than his life. When dawn arrived, the sky was painted in red and silver light. The villagers appeared in the distance, their shapes small, but their fear large. They stood at the ridge, pointing toward the wall, their voices carrying in broken cries. "Do not touch it again. Human, you will bring death upon us all," they shouted. David felt their fear press against him like the heavy air before another storm. But he could not look away from the wall, from the glowing veins that pulsed like fire beneath the stone. The voice returned, calm and heavy with age. "The second chain weakens. Soon the prison will not hold. You must decide whether you will stand with me or run from me." David swallowed hard, his throat dry. He had no answer, but the world around him seemed ready to answer for him. The ground shook again, and from within the wall came a low hum. It rose like the sound of distant drums, steady and endless. The cracks widened, spilling a faint mist that rolled across the ground like smoke. The villagers screamed and began to retreat, their fear louder than the trembling earth. David stood alone before the wall, his tools still in his hand, his mind torn between terror and wonder. The mist touched his boots, cold yet strangely alive. He knelt and pressed his hand to it, and at once visions flooded his mind. He saw battles across stars, burning fleets, and warriors made of both flesh and light. He saw a figure standing against them, a giant with eyes that glowed like suns. Then the vision broke, and the voice spoke again, softer than before. "You see now, you know what I am. Not beast, not curse, but warrior, bound by chains of fear." David staggered back, gasping for air. The vision had left him trembling, but it had also left him with understanding. This being was not simple, not a mindless creature, but something older and stronger than empires. He thought of humanity, still small in the galaxy, still learning its place among the stars. Could this prisoner truly be the ally the voice claimed, or the destroyer the villagers feared? The wall pulsed brighter, the mist spreading farther, curling around the stones and rising into the morning air. The hum turned into a deep vibration, shaking the ground so hard that David almost fell. Then came a sound like a heartbeat, slow, heavy, and alive. Boom, boom, boom. It echoed inside his chest, inside his bones. The wall itself was alive, and it was waking. The villagers lit torches despite the daylight, their fear pushing them forward. They cried out to David, calling him cursed, demanding he stop. But their voices could not drown the voice inside him. Only you can finish what has begun. The second chain must fall, or the invaders will return and claim your world as they claim mine. David turned his gaze to the villagers, their eyes wide, their hands shaking. They were desperate, not evil, but ruled by terror of the old stories. He wanted to calm them, to tell them he was not their enemy, but his words caught in his throat. How could he explain a truth that even he barely understood? The heartbeat from the wall grew faster, each thud stronger than the last. Light poured from the carvings, climbing upward like fire until the entire structure glowed. The mist thickened, curling like ghostly hands reaching for freedom. David raised his arm to shield his face, the brilliance nearly blinding him. And then the voice roared within him, not a whisper this time, but a cry of command. "Awaken." The wall cracked open in one great surge, light flooding the land. The villagers fell to their knees, wailing in terror. David stood frozen, his eyes wide, his heart pounding like the drums of war. From the center of the wall, behind the glowing mist, something vast began to move. Its shape was unclear, shifting between flesh and shadow, between warrior and storm. But one thing was certain. This was no myth, no curse. This was real, and it was waking before his eyes. The mist rolled outward, swallowing the plain. The sky above turned darker, though the sun still shone. David felt both fear and awe rising in him, fighting like twin storms. He had struck the wall, he had broken the chain, and now the ancient prisoner stirred. The whispers in his mind softened once more, almost grateful. You have begun the awakening, human, and now your path and mine are bound. The wall no longer looked like stone. It glowed like a living thing, its cracks bleeding light into the air. The mist drifted around David, cold against his skin, yet filled with an energy that made his heart race. He stood still, knowing he had gone too far to turn back. The villagers had fled in fear, their cries fading across the hills. They would return with anger, with fire and weapons, but David knew their fight was not with him. Their fight was with the truth they had buried for generations. A truth now rising from the wall before his eyes. The shape within the mist grew sharper. A tall figure, its outline strong, half shadow, half brilliance. It did not step forward, not yet, but its presence filled the plain with weight. And then the voice came again, steady and commanding. You must understand, human, I was not locked away because I was a monster. I was locked away because I carried the truth of a war that should never have been forgotten. David tightened his grip on his tool, though he knew it was useless here. His voice trembled as he asked, "What war?" The mist swirled, glowing brighter, and the voice answered. The empire that ruled these stars was vast and proud, but fear grew within them. Fear of enemies, fear of betrayal, fear of truths too powerful to face. I fought for them, I won battles in their name. But when I spoke of their corruption, when I stood against their lies, they chained me here, they buried me in stone. The words pressed against David's chest, heavy as iron. He could almost see it, the armies, the betrayal, the moment the warrior was cast into prison. They said I was cursed. They told their children I was the cause of their fall. But it was their greed, their fear, that destroyed them. The voice continued. And now, their enemies walk among the stars still, waiting for worlds like yours to rise, waiting to strike. David's breath caught. The visions from the night before returned, fleets burning in the void, alien ships blotting out suns. Could this really be the truth? Could this prisoner, forgotten for centuries, be the only one who remembered what had really happened? The mist thickened, wrapping around him like a cloak. David staggered, but did not fall. His fear was strong, but so was something else, curiosity. He had crossed worlds searching for stories, for mysteries hidden in dust, and now he had found one so vast it could rewrite history itself. The voice softened, carrying sorrow with its strength. I'm no curse, human. I'm a warrior who stood for truth when all others bowed to lies. They feared what I knew. They feared what I had become. So they built this wall, this cage, to bury me and my story. David looked at the glowing carvings, the patterns that now pulsed like veins of fire. They turned truth into legend, legend into fear, and fear into silence. The prisoner said, "But you struck the wall. You heard me, and now the silence is broken." David's mind was a storm. The villagers believed this being was a curse, but the voice claimed it was a protector. Which was real, which was a lie. He whispered, almost to himself, "If I free you, what happens then?" The answer came instantly. "Then your people will not stand alone. Then when the invaders return, I will fight with you, not against you." The ground shook again, harder than before. The cracks widened, spilling more light and mist. The figure behind the wall raised its head, and though its face was hidden, David felt its eyes on him, burning, unblinking. "You hold the power of choice, human. Your strike freed the first chain, and soon the last will fall, but your will decides what I become, ally or curse, savior or destroyer." The words cut deep. David's pulse hammered, his thoughts pulling in two directions. If the voice told the truth, then humanity might need this being more than ever. But if it lied, then freeing it would bring ruin, not salvation. The mist parted for a moment, revealing an arm made of light and armor, massive and alien, yet graceful. The figure pressed its hand against the wall from the inside, the stone shuddering under the weight of it. "Look at me, human. Do you see a monster?" the voice asked, softer now, almost pleading. David's breath shook, his hand trembling as he reached forward, touching the warm, glowing stone where the figure's hand pressed. The energy surged through him, filling him with fire and visions. He saw not only battles, but also victories, worlds saved, chains broken, people freed. And he saw betrayal, endless chains of betrayal. The voice whispered, almost human now, "They feared me because I chose truth over obedience, because I stood when they bowed, and for that, they buried me. But I'm still here, waiting, and you have the chance to decide my fate." David pulled his hand back, his chest heavy. The sun climbed higher, lighting the plain, but the wall's glow outshone even daylight. He stood between the cries of the villagers and the whispers of the prisoner, between the weight of fear and the hope of truth. Whatever choice he made now would not only shape his life, but perhaps the destiny of all humanity. The wall pulsed brighter with every passing moment. The figure within it grew clearer, no longer just a shadow, but a warrior bound in chains of light. David's chest tightened as the voice whispered again, "You have seen the truth, human, but truth alone will not protect your people. Soon the enemies who betrayed me will return. They always return when the chains weaken." The air shifted, heavy with a strange vibration. David looked up to the sky and froze. Dark shapes moved across the clouds, sharp and unnatural. At first, he thought it was only storm birds, but then the light of the rising sun revealed the truth. Ships, small and fast, gliding silently above the plain. Their sleek forms reflected the light like blades in the air. The villagers cried out from the hills, pointing in terror. They had told stories for generations of a curse, of a hunger that would return if the wall was disturbed. Now, seeing the alien ships, their fear became fury. They screamed that David had brought death, that he had cursed their world by touching the wall. David felt his throat close, his mind racing. The voice within him rose louder than the villagers' cries. "They are not myths, human. They're the same ones who betrayed me. They come to claim what is left. They come to silence me forever and to enslave your kind before you even rise." The ships spread into formation, their undersides glowing with faint energy. David had seen enough exploration reports to know what that glow meant. Weapons. His heart pounded, fear twisting into something else. Responsibility. If the voice was right, then this was not only about him, not only about the village, but about all of humanity. The mist around the wall thickened, rolling like a storm tide. The warrior's figure pressed harder against the prison, the cracks widening with each heartbeat. "Free me," the voice demanded. "I fought them once, I can fight them again, but only if you break the last chain." David clenched his fists, staring up at the ships that now hovered low over the plain. One of them released a beam of light that scanned the ground, sweeping dangerously close to him. The villagers scattered, their screams echoing across the hills. A sharp noise filled the air, a metallic cry. David turned to see small machines dropping from the ships, landing on the plain with spider-like legs. They moved with cold precision, their red eyes scanning, their weapons glowing. Drones, scouts, soldiers of the fleet. David's body trembled, but he forced himself to stay. If he ran now, the invaders would find the village, they would find his ship, and soon they would find humanity. The wall shook violently, light spilling out like fire breaking from stone. The prisoner roared within his mind. "Strike the wall. Human, free me now, or watch your world burn as mine did." David's tool felt heavier than ever, his hand shaking as he lifted it. He stared at the drones, at the ships, at the mist swirling around the wall. The villagers' cries echoed. "He will destroy us," but the alien voice thundered louder. I will save you. One of the drones locked onto him, red light burning in its eyes. A beam fired, striking the ground near his feet, exploding dirt into the air. David stumbled, coughing, his ears ringing. The weapon was real. The threat was real. And if these were only scouts, what would happen when the full fleet arrived? Rising to his knees, David gripped the tool with both hands. His breath was ragged, his body sore, but his choice was made. If humanity was already a target, then silence would not protect them. Fear would not save them. He raised the tool high, lightning flashing once more across the sky. And with all the strength left in him, he struck the wall. The sound was not stone breaking, it was chains shattering. The cracks burst open, light rushing outward in a wave that blinded the plane. The drones froze, their systems failing as the energy surged through the air. The villagers fell silent, their screams swallowed by the roar of awakening. And from within the wall, the prisoner's figure finally moved free. The warrior stepped forward, tall as a tower, his body made of both flesh and light. Armor of ancient design clung to him, glowing with fire from within. His eyes blazed like twin suns, and his voice thundered across the plain. You have freed me, human. Now we fight together. The ships above trembled as if the sky itself feared him. The drones hissed, their weapons charging again. But David no longer stood alone. The prisoner raised his hand, and with a single motion, energy tore across the ground, shattering the machines into dust. The villagers fell to their knees in silence, unable to believe what they saw. David stared up at the warrior he had freed, his chest rising and falling with both fear and awe. The war had come, the enemy had returned. But now, humanity had an ancient ally, bound not by chains but by choice, and the battle was only beginning. The plane shook with the force of awakening. The wall no longer held its prisoner, yet the air still trembled as if the chains of ages had not fully broken. The warrior stood tall, his body a living storm of light and armor, eyes burning like twin suns. But around his form, fragments of glowing chains still clung, heavy and unbroken. David staggered backward, his chest heaving. The drones lay shattered in the dirt, their metal husks smoking from the warrior's strike. Above, the alien ships circled, their weapons glowing brighter, preparing to unleash destruction on everything below. The villagers cowered on the hills, silent now, caught between terror and awe. The voice thundered within David's mind, no longer only a whisper. One chain remains, human, the last seal. Without it I cannot reach my full strength. Without it I cannot face their fleet. David gripped his tool tighter, his body shaking from exhaustion and fear. His eyes darted between the warrior, the villagers, and the ships descending like predators from the sky. What happens if I break it? He shouted, his voice cracking. The warrior turned, his blazing gaze fixed on him. Then I am free, completely free, and your enemies will know what true war is. The ground rumbled, a crack spreading wide at David's feet. The mist thickened again, curling around the warrior like chains of smoke. It wrapped him, pulling him back, as if the prison itself still fought to hold him. His great hands clawed against invisible bonds, each movement sending ripples of light into the sky. Strike, human, strike now, the voice roared, or watch them burn your people to ash. Above, the first of the ships unleashed its fire. A beam of burning light shot downward, tearing into the plane with a blast that threw David to the ground. The earth split, dust rising in choking clouds, villagers screaming as they fled in every direction. David coughed, crawling across the dirt, his eyes wide with terror. The ships were no longer waiting. They had begun the attack. The warrior fought against the glowing chains, his body straining with power. Energy poured from him in great waves, but still the prison's last seal held. Break it, he thundered. Only you can, human. Only your strike can end the chains. David pulled himself to his knees, gripping his tool with both hands. Fear clawed at his mind. Fear of the villagers' curses, fear of unleashing something too powerful to control. But the sound of the ships above, the cries of the fleeing people, and the fire tearing into the land left him no choice. He stumbled to the base of the wall, now cracked and glowing like molten stone. The air burned hot against his skin, his vision blurred from the heat and smoke. His hands trembled as he raised the tool, every muscle screaming in pain. The voice softened, heavy with both strength and sorrow. This is the moment, human. Your strike will decide more than your life. It will decide your future, your people's survival, and mine. David gritted his teeth, his heart pounding louder than the thunder of the ships. He thought of Earth, of humanity spread across fragile colonies, still so small in the endless galaxy. He thought of the villagers, fearful yet innocent, standing powerless against an enemy from the stars. And he thought of the warrior, chained not by weakness but by betrayal, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to set him free. With a cry that tore from his very soul, David struck. The tool smashed into the glowing stone, and for a moment all sound vanished. Then the world erupted. Light exploded outward, a storm of fire and energy that swallowed the plane. The chains shattered, each one breaking with the sound of thunder. The warrior roared, his voice shaking the heavens, as the last seal dissolved into sparks of light. The ships above reeled as the shockwave hit, their formations scattering. Some tumbled from the sky, their hulls breaking under the storm of energy. The villagers fell to their knees, blinded by the brilliance, their cries lost in the roar of freedom. David collapsed to the ground, his body weak, his tools shattered to pieces in his hands. Through the storm of light, the warrior stepped forward, no longer bound, no longer chained. His form was vast, his armor blazing with ancient power, his eyes like suns burning through the clouds. He raised his hands to the sky, and with a single motion, unleashed a torrent of energy that tore through the nearest ship, splitting it in two. The air shook with the force, the ground cracked, and the sky itself seemed to bow to his return. David lifted his head, barely able to breathe. The warrior turned his gaze upon him, and for the first time, his voice carried not just command but gratitude. You broke the final seal. Human, you chose freedom over fear. Now your enemies will fall, and your kind will rise. The sky burned with fire, the ships regrouping for battle. The war had begun, but the chains were gone. And for the first time in centuries, the ancient warrior stood free. The plain was no longer silent. The ground trembled under the weight of war. The sky burned with fire, and the last echoes of shattered chains still rang in the air. David lay on the dirt, his body weak, but his eyes wide with awe. Before him stood the warrior, no longer a prisoner, no longer bound by stone or lies, but free, tall as a tower, blazing like a sun against the darkness. Above, the enemy ships circled like vultures, their weapons glowing as they prepared to strike again. The drones that had survived the awakening swarmed across the ground, their red eyes burning with hunger. But the warrior raised his arm, and with one sweep of power, a wave of light cut through them, scattering their broken parts across the plain. The villagers, who had once cursed David, now watched in silence, their fear mixing with wonder. They had called the warrior a curse, but what stood before them looked like salvation. The voice thundered, not only in David's mind, but across the air itself. You freed me, human, and now I fight for you. I fight for all your kind. The words shook the earth, yet they carried a weight of promise. David's chest tightened. He felt both proud and terrified. He had brought this being into the world again, and now the fate of more than just himself rested on that choice. The first of the ships unleashed its fire, beams of burning light streaking across the sky. The warrior raised both hands, and the beam struck against a shield of pure energy, scattering harmlessly into sparks. The villagers gasped, falling to their knees, their cries no longer curses but prayers. David forced himself to his feet, swaying but unbroken. The warrior turned his blazing eyes upon him. "Stand, human. You are no longer only a witness. You are part of this war." Together, they faced the enemy. The warrior leapt into the sky, his body blazing like a comet, colliding with the nearest ship. The impact shook the heavens. The ship split apart in a shower of fire, falling in burning pieces to the earth. David shielded his eyes, but his heart pounded with a strange fire. He felt small, powerless, yet somehow vital. Without his strike, the warrior would never have been free. Without his choice, humanity would have no defender. The remaining ships regrouped, their weapons blazing. One descended low, unleashing more drones, their metallic legs digging into the ground as they charged toward David. He stumbled back, grabbing a broken piece of stone from the shattered wall. It was no weapon, but he held it like one, ready to fight. The drones closed in, red lights flashing, but before they could strike, the warrior descended again, a storm of light tearing them apart. "You are not alone," the voice boomed. "Not now, not ever again." The battle raged across the sky, beams of fire and storms of energy clashing. Each strike from the warrior tore through enemy ships, but the fleet was vast and their weapons deadly. David watched in both terror and awe as the sky burned with war. The villagers clung to the hills, their voices rising in cries of fear and hope. They had lived in the shadow of the wall for centuries, but now they witnessed its truth. It had not been a curse that slept within, but a warrior who had carried hope through endless chains. At last, the battle turned. The fleet, broken and scattered, retreated into the clouds, their fires fading as they fled back to the stars. The warrior landed upon the plain, his body dimming as the power settled. David fell to his knees, exhaustion taking his strength. The villagers slowly approached, their fear replaced by reverence. They looked at David not with curses, but with gratitude, whispering that he had saved them. The warrior stood over him, tall and silent, then finally spoke. "You struck the wall, you broke the chains, you chose freedom over fear, and because of you, your kind will rise." David raised his head, his voice hoarse. "Is it over?" he asked. The warrior shook his head, light burning in his eyes. "No, human, this was only the first battle. The enemy will return, greater and stronger, but now I am free, and now humanity is no longer alone." The words settled like fire in David's heart. He had not just freed a prisoner. He had begun an alliance, one that would echo across the stars. The villagers bowed, the sky cleared, and the wall that had once been a prison now stood as a broken monument to truth. David rose slowly, his body aching, but his spirit unshaken. He looked at the warrior, and for the first time, he felt not fear, but hope. The ancient voice whispered once more, softer now, almost like a friend. "This is the beginning. Human, the story of your people has only just begun.